Do you remember that game on the Game Boy Advance? Yes, I'm talking about Advance Wars. When I found my old Game Boy in the back of a dusty drawer, all those childhood memories came back. I still remember those endless games, whether it was on the way to the vacation in the car or comfortably lying on my bed. Holding that old Game Boy in my hands made me feel like a teenager again. Now, 15 years later, I want to bring the game back to life through a diorama. And to do that, I'm gonna use 3D printing, paint, liquid plaster, static grass, extruded foam, and Mod Podge. The first part is 3D modeling. Among all the available units, I decided to recreate the Neo tank facing a Mega tank. After several searches, I decided to mainly base myself on the Nintendo DS version of the game Dual Strike. For the 3D modeling, I used plasticity. After several hours of modeling, the two tanks were ready. I also made sure that all the parts were detached to facilitate the printing and to make them fit in the printer. For the soldiers, I used ZBrush. And now, let's move on to the most boring part of 3D printing, supporting models. For this part, I used Lychee. It took me a few hours to complete this step. After 2 nights of printing, the tanks were ready. It was time to clean the prints with some sanding. Here, I'm just using an 800 grit, then 1200 grit. The sanding is done. Now I apply a primer coat of black army painter. And now let's move on to the painting. The base color of the Mega tank, I started with a dark green with a little bit of white. For the tank truck's wheel, I use a gunmetal paint. But now that I see it again, it would have needed a little bit more yellow. For the Neo tank, the base color will be a warm grey, so white, black and a little bit of red, which will perfectly represent the Black Hole Army. For the shipping, I will do that with a sponge and a little bit of black paint. I want to stay quite simple with the shipping, I don't want to have it too damaged. I finished the modeling part with the barriers, which I sculpted with Magic Sculpt, primed and painted. Let's move on the environment. Even though I was mainly inspired by the Dual Strike version, here I'm going to take a slight detour and use the environment from the Black Hole Rising version, which I appreciate more, and these are the two I've chosen. For the base, I use a square of expanded foam. I pour liquid plaster into it to create a textured ground. I also placed a corkboard that will represent the road. It gives a low effort texture. And now some paint. Then, with the Mod Podge, I flocked the static grass. For the background, I was inspired by old matte painting techniques, the same ones used for the Trip to the Moon or Star Wars. It consists of a simple painting of the background on a flat surface to create an illusion of depth. For this, I use a wood cardboard panel that I primed with gesso. On the first layer, I apply a blue acrylic for the sky. For the clouds, I use oil paint because I prefer longer drying times. The last part is the user interface. So I need to make the portrait, the health bar, and the score. I made the portrait of Kindle for the Black Hole Army and Javier for the Green Army. Both were painted with acrylic paint. Now I put everything together, glued the barrier, the trees, and it was done. And there you have it. After all this hard work, here's the final result of my Advance Wars diorama. Hope you liked it and see you for the next one.